Thank you, Eli. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is something really exciting for Saturday morning at 9 a.m. It's FTC documentation, and more specifically, some of the judging changes for 2020, as well as some tips and tricks to make your FTC documentation stand out for the judges. So a little bit of an introduction. My name is Erin Wenig. I'm a first alumni from an FRC team and an FTC judge the past 3 or so years. I've judged the Think Award multiple times, including at the state championships, and have seen a lot of notebooks. Georgia has seen many more notebooks. If you want to introduce yourself, Georgia.
Hi, I'm Georgia Clark. I am the FTC Regional Lead Judge Advisor for Georgia. That's a new position this year. I have been judging for, I think, about 10 years, and I've been Judge Advisor for about 5 years now.
Awesome. All right, just a reminder, if you do have questions anytime during the presentation, please post them in the Q&A, and we will get to them either during the presentation, depending on if we have time, as well as we will have a question and answer session at the very end. So I'm going to flip to the next slide, and Georgia's going to start talking about the 2020 changes.
Okay, so brand new for this season, we have the engineering portfolio. Instead of submitting an engineering notebook or two for judging, we're now asking teams to submit an engineering portfolio. Our expectation is that teams will continue to create an engineering notebook, and the notebook should be kept in the team's pit area for judges to review if there are questions, or if the judges would like to see more on the covered topic. We have two goals with the portfolio. First, we would like teams to be able to identify the pages in their engineering notebook that do a great job of displaying content that the students are proud of, such as, I'm sorry, Erin, hold on just a second.
No worries.
Such as their design concepts and their drawings. The second goal for the portfolio is to encourage students on the importance of clear and concise information sharing. It should encourage teams to be concise in the selection of their content, and this is a great learning experience for college and professional careers where portfolios will likely be expected. I believe we went through all that slide. The Think Award judging will start with the engineering portfolio. So let's look at the formats. Electronic is preferred for this season, and that's because we are expecting remote event judging. So teams will need to create a single file that is shareable, such as a PDF, of their engineering portfolio. For traditional events, teams would print out their engineering portfolio. And you can refer to the Game Manual Part 1, Section 9 is Judging for more details on all of this. And there are two versions of the game manual this year. One is for traditional events, one is for remote events. So make sure you look at the remote events version because that is what we are planning for this year. Next slide. Now we'll look at the requirements for engineering portfolio. In order to be considered for judged awards, a team must submit an engineering portfolio. It must not exceed 15 pages of content. The team number must appear on the top of the front page. The engineering portfolios will not be considered without that team number. And again, refer to the game manual. Next page. Let's look at the recommendations for the engineering portfolio. It is recommended that a team number is on the top of every page. It is a good idea to connect with the award criteria to specific content in your engineering portfolio. So the portfolio could include a summary of the engineering content, and you would want to include your CAD and detailed drawings. You could include a summary of your team information that would include the overall team information and your outreach activities. And you could also include a summary of your team plan, which could be about your fundraising, strategic plans, sustainability plans, or plans for the development of new skills. And to help you remember all of these things and check your portfolio for all these requirements, there is a self-assessment sheet that will be coming out soon, and we will get that information to you when it is available.
Thank you, Georgia. That's a great overview of what's going to be expected for next year. I'm personally really excited to review all these different portfolios and see what teams come up with, especially since it's new. So what we're going to talk about now is just more in depth of different sections within the engineering notebook and portfolio, and some tips and tricks to make your documentation stand out and be the best possible for both your team and the judges. And Georgia, if you have any additional commentary, please just feel free to chime in. All right, so we talked a little bit about this. Well, Georgia talked a little bit about this, is like why we do engineering documentation. I go on the FTC subreddit and I see lots of teams and lots of individuals talking about the engineering notebook and how much of a burden it is every season. And yes, it is a lot of work, but it also is really important, not only within the scope of your team season, but also as you become and go towards being professional engineers. I mean, at the very basic, it's essential for Judge FTC Awards to help track your journey, see where you come from, and tell the story from A to B. More importantly, it allows you to share your ideas with others and communicate with others. And beyond that, helps them understand why your ideas are great. And that's really important for judges, because you have to convince them that your ideas and your robot and your overall season is noteworthy and deserves recognition. So a little bit more about that professional component, what it means to be a professional engineer and be able to communicate. This is a tweet from Babak Faradowski, who is NASA Mohawk guy. He is a systems engineer at NASA JPL and has worked on the Curiosity and most recently the Cassini missions to Mars. And he had something to say about how and why communication is important. It's just engineering is about communication, how to convey a complex idea or to successfully convince an audience of why your ideas matter. He goes on to say later that great storytelling can mean entire missions. It can make or break entire NASA missions, if you think about that. So we're doing that, but at a little bit smaller scale. It's not necessarily a NASA mission, but it's your entire team season and telling that story of your team. So documentation isn't just for you. This is like the know your audience piece. Like first it's team members, mentors, but also if you think about parents, sponsors, and judges, that they might not know about the engineering process, they might not know about programming, your team, or even FIRST, or have that FIRST background. So the engineering notebook is a great opportunity for you to share your story with them, and especially when it comes to sponsors and judges, you're able to reap some benefits for your team. Engineering notebooks are great to show and share about your team's story when you can't necessarily spend a lot of time talking to individual sponsors on it. So this year, there's only one requirement. There's only one thing you actually have to have in order to submit a portfolio or an engineering notebook. That's your team number. That's it. Every year, though, we see teams that do not have their team numbers. We do the best as judges to allow you to put your team number or remind you to put your team number so we get as many notebooks that qualify as possible. But really, that's the only requirement. However, there are 4 parts suggested for the notebook and then strongly recommended for the engineering portfolio. And that's what Georgia was talking about as far as the team information, team plan, and engineering content. There's also a summary page that's a little bit different than previous years, and we can get to that and how that fits into this. So if you're thinking about it, and again, if you're going back to engineering documentation for the purpose of judged awards, there's a lot of connection between the two things. Inspire Award, the highest award, you have to have a engineering portfolio. The Connect Award, this year was really interesting to note is that the portfolio must include a summary of how the team acquired new mentors or acquired knowledge and expertise from their mentors. That's something a little bit new. And you can go down the list and see engineering portfolio must include all the way down to everything. One thing to note, for some of these large, bigger awards, there's something at the end that says the team should have an engineering notebook available for judges to review that provides the detailed information to support information in the portfolio or to inspire judges to look at their engineering notebook. You can find all of these things in more detail and look at all the different requirements for this year or what is included in the awards in that remote judging game manual 1 that Georgia linked earlier on. So beyond just those awards, there's also the award that is all to do with engineering documentation, which is the Think Award. So having a good portfolio and engineering notebook that backs up the portfolio is important. So it's noted that you have an engineering portfolio, you submit that, the judges review that, but if you make the first cut or the first few cuts, the judges will be interested in seeing that engineering notebook. You're not off the hook for it. We'll still be using it as a reference to really understand your team's journey and to see the work that you've done during the year. So after judging notebooks for a few years, there's some really good examples that always come up on top, but if we're going to get the top 10, the top 5 notebooks, there's some things, smaller things that help set those notebooks or those pieces of documentation apart from the others. And I'm going to go into a little bit of that and what we typically look for. And again, Georgia, if you have anything to add, just always chime in. So the first section I'm going to talk about is team information. Team information is interesting because that's where it's both about your team, but also the outreach your team does. That first smushes those two things together. It's not that they include outreach in it, but it's not like a separate outreach section. Again, that's up to you if you want to do that for your team. So this year with the new requirements, the new suggestions, they provided a few more different examples of what can be included in the team information and for the notebook and the portfolio. That's timelines, outreach to STEM communities specifically. That's good for the Connect Award. Training courses, anything you've developed to help other teams, and then team identity. Then there's also some things from the previous times for the engineering notebook, which is team history, team members, and mentor introductions, of course, without last names for the team members. Those are the things that you can put in there. So the question is specifically on outreach documentation. So every year, what happens is that both the Think judges as well as the judges for the Motivate and Connect Awards really dive deep and try to find the connection between what the teams are telling us, what you guys are telling us about what your team has done in the outreach, and what's documented in the engineering notebook or this year, the portfolio. Some things that help us as judges understand more about your team and understand that connection is documenting who, what, and where. Who has been involved, where it is, where it took place, and then also, I forgot when. When's really important. So there's one big thing to consider is that the FTC season is around May 2019 to the present. So that's what judges can consider a part of the season and the outreach that's in consideration. Sometimes teams put outreach that's a little bit older, and it's great because you're allowed to do that, and they also state the date that it takes place. What's really difficult is when judges come across outreach that it wasn't clear when it actually took place. So we have to do extra legwork to go out to the team and talk to them about when this outreach took place and understand what actually happened in this current season. You can also talk a little bit about why the outreach, why you did the outreach. Sometimes there's a good connection between the team identity and what the team values and the outreach they conduct. And then also just a little bit of what you got out of it, a little bit of reflection. That's kind of optional, but it is a good way to think about and be more conscious about the outreach that you do. You're not just doing outreach for outreach sake. What's really helpful to document is pictures, flyers, emails, other artifacts as a way to quickly tell the story about your outreach event without having to write paragraphs of information. And one last point that's really important, the same goes for finding out when an outreach event took place, is who is actually involved, who made the outreach event happen. So especially with teams from multiple schools or teams that work together closely, a lot of the times the judges have to ask the question, who led the outreach effort? We do have to go on a fact-finding mission a lot of times and talk to teams and ask, what was your contribution to this outreach versus in other teams, and understand who really led the effort. Sometimes it is equal, and it's fairly equal, that's fine, but also we want to know if it was equal or if one team led the led that initiative. I have seen some teams that clearly stated in their notebook, this is what we did, or we were invited by X, Y, and Z team to participate. And I love that because it's clear. It makes sure that there's no ambiguity in what the contributions of the teams were. And also it shows a great sense of gracious professionalism because it recognizes another team and the impact and how they helped another team complete an outreach event. That's really important, and also helps us judges so we don't have to keep going out to teams and trying to figure out what the actual story is. So moving on to the team plan. So the team plan is, it's a really, I feel it's a really important part of the notebook and the portfolio. Sometimes teams kind of forget about it, it seems, but it's really important to think about not just it has to be in the notebook in order to qualify for certain awards, but the fact that having a solid team plan can help ensure that your team is strong, and then also it can maintain itself for next year. Because it's all about planning around and what your team goals are, how you achieve fundraising, and how you can make sure that you're a sustainable team. So some things that can, again, the criteria and what is considered for this has kind of been expanded with the addition of portfolio. Typically, it would have been like the business plan and strategic plan. Now they talk about fundraising goals and finances, sustainability goals, and community service goals. And those are all things that you can include. The question is like, how do you pick what plan to use or what's best for you, what's best to use and what judges want? We don't really say like, oh, a strategic plan is much more interesting and valuable than a business plan. It's mostly about what is your team going to actually use and get value out of. If a strategic plan is more what your team needs, go ahead and do that. If you want to do a more formal business plan, that's also great, really of interest. It's all about like what's going to help your team make it to next year, or what's going to help your team fundraise to go to World Championships, or to do the extra outreach event, or even just to go to the movies together and make sure that you have enough funds to do some fun things too. So you can use, I've seen like graphs, really nice budgets and finances. That's really helpful. Other visuals, some things called SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. All those different things that go into team plans that are really great. Again, having pictures, showing graphs really helps communicate things really fast, especially for judges who have a very limited time to look at things. One thing to note about something like a team plan is you can really get through the content for that in about one team meeting. It can take the place of like a big brainstorm session. You just get all the team members and you talk through what do you want to do in the future, why you want to do it, what are the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities involved, and then just have someone document that entire thing. So I am getting some questions I'm seeing. I'm going to actually pause, if that's okay, and answer them since that has to do with this previous section. All right. There's a lot of questions coming in. I have a little bit of lag. So should also mention, okay, that's Robert. Thank you, Robert, for the comment. Yes, it's May 2020. You're correct. Not May 2019. That was my fault. 2020 is I think it's 2020, right? May 2020, Georgia? Yeah.
Yeah, and they just made a change that now actually your season can begin after you finished your last event. So that's new this year.
So that would be about like February 2020.
Well, some teams take that break.
Right.
So, it would depend on when your team kind of starts back up. Right.
Thank you for that clarification.
The important thing, I think, is just that it has to be relevant to, the new season.
Definitely. It can't be something that your team did 2 years ago.
Right.
Yeah. All right. How big should the portfolio be? It is going to be 15 pages. So there's a lot to fit within 15 pages. So it seems you can be a little bit more selective about the information. And that's something that's going to be a fun conversation to have, I assume.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. What goes in it? All right. Just to continue on to more of the engineering content. So the engineering content is all about your robot, design, build, and programming journey for the current season. It can include design and build the robot over the season, programming information, the control award submission. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to have some control reward related information, so something to do with the controls within the portfolio, but also you upload the control award submission separately from the portfolio itself. I think that's what it stated in the judging documents for this year. So the robot design and build documentation is about showing iteration, which is like progress over time, what you've tried, what worked and didn't work and why. Decision making, how you voted on things, how you decided which, or how you tested things to decide which which design works the best, and then highlighting key features, like why this cool solution to your robot works the best and how it's innovative. Again, pictures, sketches, CAD, pictures with captions. A little bit to know about captions. Captions are great. We really like captions. There's some teams that just have pages and pages of CAD or just pages of unannotated pictures. And while it's really interesting, we kind of understand sometimes what's going on or what's the differences between the different CAD iterations or what you're actually building the picture. So having a brief sentence about what's in the picture is really helpful to us judges to understand what's going on. Math concepts learned and used during the season. Again, since we do have middle school students, it doesn't have to be very advanced math. It's just showing that the correlation or how you use math to help make decisions and help design your robot. It can be any kind of math. We're not going to be saying it has to be anything complex. It can be geometry, algebra, whatever have you, and what level of math you're at. Descriptions and charts describe how you make design decisions. Some teams have some really good pro-con charts, some really good testing information about they tested this component and it performed this way against this other component. Do whatever you need to do this to kind of show off your data and to make it easy for us to understand why you did things a certain way. One of the biggest things is that show how your designs changed during the season and why they changed. What I really like is teams that continue to document after any meets or after any robot runs, and they have a reflection at the end and say, this really worked during this competition. This didn't work. We're going to fix this next time. And they show, here's how they fixed it. That's really valuable to us because it shows that a team has a level of thought in the process and understanding of constant, I can't think of the word right now. I need more coffee. Basically constant willingness to find solutions and find better solutions and improvement, constant improvement. That's the term. So we really look for those things. And it's not just here's our story, we have a perfect robot at the end. No one has a perfect robot. I've never seen a perfect robot. It's understanding and showing us the process that you go through. And I find that's the most exciting part for me is to see how things have changed, what mistakes were made, and calling out the mistakes. That's really valuable information. All right. Let's see, the next slide. Programming documentation is all about the decision-making process and your thought process. It is encouraged to include programming information within the engineering portfolio that connects to the control award, and it's just to have some components in there. One big thing I want to talk about is including the code. Some teams I see include the entire code and just print out their code. I'm not a programmer. Some of us are not programmers. It's probably really interesting so who can understand code, but for something for me and for some other judges, it's we don't understand what's important about the code or why what decisions you made during the year. Some teams that do really well or have some really interesting approaches to show off their programming have a one-page summary. And they say, this is why we did this programming this way. Here are the cool things that we did. Or they have charts and diagrams saying, this is the decision flows that our robot follows and the sensors it uses. Illustrations like that, summaries like that, really both help for us non-programmers, but also those who are judging the control award to understand what to look for in the code and why your code is innovative. It's like kind of like a cheat sheet. And another thing is about the control award submission. It's so worth it to fill out the 2-page control award submission every year. Sometimes you only have 5 submissions. So really, 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 it's a great award to go through, and also it allows you to take some time and really think about your program process. I highly encourage you to submit for it. We need to give the control award judges more to do. So again, as I mentioned before, you can use flowcharts, diagrams, and control schematics to easily illustrate your programming flows and features. Again, cheat sheet, shortcut, it allows us to understand what your thought process is quickly and easily, especially for non-programmers. And then there's the meeting logs. Teams do meeting logs all sorts of different ways. There's suggested ways within that first suggest. You don't have to do it that way. It's really about consistent formatting, clean formatting, and easy to follow and read. Meeting logs can include date, time, and attendance, summary of the meeting, decisions made, to-do lists. Those I think are really valuable because it again shows that progress and iteration. Reflections describing what changes were made and why. Again, pictures, sketches, math, graphs, and other visuals. It's so sad when I see meeting logs that are just a typed page and there's no pictures. I really like seeing those pictures because it helps document it beyond the paragraph. And also, if you have pictures in there, you actually have to write less. You don't need to write huge paragraphs describing what happened in the meeting if you have pictures showing what's happening in the meeting with some captions. It's a balance of both things. Another note is don't stop the logs once you start competing. I find some of those logs will be the most interesting after they start competing, after they learn more about their robot. And then some people separate the meeting logs and engineering content. That's fine either way to do that. I don't know if you have any preference, Georgia, but I don't think there's any. If you have a separate engineering part of your notebook or documentation from your meeting logs, that's okay. For the portfolio, you will have to have a separate engineering section with highlights from your season. And then again, refer to the first FTC notebook guidance for more information about that, and also just the game manual part 1 for remote events. All right. All right, so just to know about the summary page. It's still around. It's suggested that you don't need a summary page necessarily for your engineering portfolio. That's only 15 pages, but it is suggested to have a summary page for your notebook. Especially if you make it to the top cut and judges want to see your notebook, having a summary page that talks about and connects what was in your portfolio to where it is in your notebook, it would be really helpful for us. It, again, gives us a shortcut to find the information we need, and also shows that you have an organized notebook and can point us towards the information that you want to highlight. So summary pages are still there. They're a little bit different, but they're still very valuable for the judging process. All right. So as I was mentioning, and I've mentioned a few of these things, like what really separates like an okay set of documentation from a really great set of documentation are quite a few things. Like okay documentation is a notebook you open up and you're like, I don't know where it is I'm looking at or what I'm looking at. Has layouts that change a lot. There's no consistency, so we don't understand what part of the process we're looking at. Sometimes there's some great handwritten notebooks, but there's notebooks where the handwriting is a little bit difficult to read and understand, or people put a background that's really busy that you can't actually read the writing on it. Whereas with great documentation, there's organized sections, you know where things are. Team numbers on each page of the portfolio is really helpful too, as Georgia mentioned. Consistent page layout that uses legible fonts and point size. I know like Lucia handwriting might look really cool and be like you have a handwritten notebook, but it might be a little bit difficult for judges to read, especially if it's like at 10-point font size or something really little. Has pictures, shows CAD and sketches, shows calculations. It really shows and tells the process. Describes the process behind the strategy, robot design, and programming. It isn't like you just have a finished robot that you're presenting. It's talking about your journey. Has a robust team plan and a strategy that is usable. Sometimes when the engineering content is pretty equal, especially when you're going to the Think Award, I look at things like smaller things, like did they actually spend time on the other components of their notebook? How is their team information laid out? How is their team plan laid out? So if all things are equal with engineering content, those other little things can help kind of weigh in a little bit more. And that's some judges may not look at it the same way. That's just an approach that I take. And then shows mistakes. It's a big thing. And really like, not necessarily highlights those mistakes, but just makes it visible that, hey, we made this mistake, here's how we fixed it. It isn't just, we made this mistake, we're really sad, which can also happen too. It's how we fixed it and how we want to fix it. And then we're almost at the last slide. So too long, didn't read engineering tips. Document everything. Good rule of thumb is if it's not in the documentation, it didn't happen. Especially when it's virtual this year, it's really important to make sure that you document everything so judges can go back and refer and learn about your team that way. Show your work and mistakes. Pictures. I talked a lot about pictures. Please use pictures and charts and ways to visualize your information. Know your audience. We aren't all engineers or programmers, and we really appreciate when you walk us through that process. It is because the notebook isn't just for you, it's for others as well. And one thing to remember is judges have limited time to review, so make it easy to find and skim information. Even with a 50-page portfolio, I can imagine that it's going to be a process of trying to find the key information and make sure that all those sections are there, the team numbers in the front, the team pages have the numbers, that you have the content available. So just be aware that there's going to be different levels of judges go through multiple processes of looking at these things. And a lot of the times we only have a few minutes the first time we see it to try to see which ones are coming up to the top. All right, before we end, any other thoughts, Georgia?
I think you've done a great job covering everything, Erin. You had a lot of good comments. I agree with everything you said. So hopefully people listen and pay attention to what you said.
I hope so too. And I probably should have put my email, but if there's any other questions after this, I can definitely answer those. I guess to a limited degree. Georgia probably will know better, but about what we can and cannot say as judges.
So we have constant contact with the coaches. FTC is Georgia FTC is sending out like bi-monthly newsletters. So we will be keeping in touch with the teams and getting feedback.
All right. So I guess questions. I see there's a lot of questions. Okay, so I have a question from Sierra Frisbee. Since the engineering notebook is no longer the main requirement, although it's still considered later, are there specific requirements to be similar to past seasons? Georgia probably knows this better than me, but the only requirement this year is the team name, the team number on the front cover. It's very similar. If you look at the content, it's very similar to the same sections and suggestions as last year. So if you have a notebook they already started, that's going to be perfect for what's going to be coming for this year. Let's see.
Okay, and I see a question that just popped up. Says that I mentioned a newsletter about Notebook. It's not specific to Notebook. The newsletter is about everything going on with the teams. So it's not specific to Notebook. But if there are some kind of updates, then it will be included in that newsletter.
Let's see. I have a question. Whoop, these things keeps moving. So there's a notebook and a portfolio. Yes, there's both a notebook and a portfolio. The portfolio is what the judge is going to be looking at initially, and the notebook should be available if the judges request it. I think there also might be some place where you upload the notebook as well, so the judges can easily find it and not necessarily have to request it from you directly. Again, I think the details are being worked out.
Yes, the portfolio is new this year. So the portfolio is what you will submit at your judging session. Since we will be having remote judging this year, then that will be submitted ahead of your scheduled interview. And then, if we need more information, you will submit the notebook. But to start with, you will only submit that portfolio. And when should you have the portfolio ready? The portfolio needs to be ready when you go to competition, because that is what you will submit for your judging interview.
Yeah. Another question about the portfolio PDF and physical, right? It's only going to be remote events, so a digital form of the portfolio is what is needed for this.
Right, that's preferred for this year. Yes, you can have, a handwritten notebook or portfolio, but because we do foresee remote judging this year, we're trying to give you a heads up and say, hey, for this year we recommend that you use electronic, because if you do handwritten, then you're going to have to scan those pages, and sometimes that doesn't come out clear. So we're just trying to give you a heads up for this year. You're going to be better off to go with the electronic version.
I have a question from Samantha from Team 9785 Kronos is, in the team info, what information do you recommend us having to describe our team? This is usually up to the team and what they feel like information they want to share with the judges. There's nothing that's required. Some things I've seen are team history, how the team got their name and how the team got a mascot. It can be a lot of different things. And Georgia, ever any other suggestions for that section?
I'm sorry, I was reading one of the questions.
No worries. That, Karen? Any other type of information teams typically put in the team info section of the portfolio or notebook?
The team info section. Well, what sets your team apart? What stands out about your team? Judges want to see the highlights. What makes your team stand out from another team? So something like that would be helpful. And remember that, this is going to be a summary, so it has to be concise. Clear and concise, that's the rule for portfolios.
Yeah, because John Welsh has a question about what the difference between a notebook and a portfolio. George is saying clear and concise. It's going to be 15 pages, and it's kind of a highlight. It is a highlight of your team season. It's what you want to tell the judges about your team. And Georgia also mentioned that you can connect the content of the portfolio directly to the different awards. So there's a connection. Judges can say, okay, this is what they're kind of talking about that would go towards the Connect Award or the Design Award. So it's you and your team sitting down and saying, this is what we're really proud of, and this is what we want the judges to know about our team for this year and our season.
Right. One way you could think of it is if the judging interview, if you think of that kind of like a job interview, then this portfolio would be your resume. It's the condensed version of why you qualify, why your team qualifies for all the different awards. So think of it like that, and that might help you. But yes, the portfolio is there to make you stand out, get the judge's attention, to show why you qualify for different awards. Whereas the notebook is going to have all the details, and that will be available if judges need to go deeper into it.
there's a question about timing from a member of Teams Spartan 6989 about the portfolio will the portfolio have to be done before the first meet around October or the league tournament?
Before the tournament, yes, that's yes, because remember the portfolio is a summary of what's happened up to that point.
And then another question from John Welsh: do we need to include sections of the portfolio, or is it just one big summary? The game manual describes these different sections, having a team section and a team engineering content section and a team information and plan section. So there can be distinct sections within that portfolio, similar to how there's distinct sections within the notebook.
Yes, I agree. You could do it that way. I mean, the sections, aren't going to be big sections like you'd have in your notebook, but yes, you do probably want to distinguish, this is what we're talking about on this page. Like your team section may just be one page, and then you may have one page for your outreach. I think the largest part of your portfolio is going to be the robot design process. I see that taking up the majority of your portfolio, but we do also want to have a team summary and outreach, your team plan. We do also want to see those things summarized.
All right, we have a question from Simon. Is there any specific format that you recommend for the portfolio, or do you think teams should just go off the rails with creativity?
Well, for that one, I would say keep in mind that, 15 pages is not a lot of space.
Yeah.
So, I would do what works good for you.
Yeah, I think, I would look for consistent formatting. And again, those things that I talked about, like what separates okay from great documentation, consistent formatting, it's legible, it is, there's no crazy backgrounds or crazy fonts. It's easy to read and understand quickly. I would actually look for examples of ways that teams have condensed a lot of information into a short amount of space. Is to look at the FRC business plan summaries. And it is completely different, but it's the same idea of how to get a lot of information in a short amount of space. And some teams have come up with some really interesting ways to condense that information that still is legible. Some teams have some great examples online, but you can maybe see what those teams have done, again, with the space constraints. Let's see. Would you suggest a table of contents in the portfolio, or would that be a waste of the 15-page limit?
That is going to be up to the team to decide. I'm not sure exactly how helpful the table of contents would be in a portfolio, but that will be up to the team to decide, I think. The main thing is, I don't know. I'm going to leave that one up to you, whether table of contents would help or not. I don't know that you would want to use a whole page just for that. I think if you lay the summary out well enough, then you might not need that. But I'll leave that up to the team to decide.
Great. Thank you, Susan. Are there any other questions? We have about 15 minutes left, so we can take a few more questions, or if there are no other questions, we can always end a little early too. Oh, is separating the portfolio by awards a good idea? Personally, I think it's one of those, it's up to the teams. I don't know if you have any other thoughts about that, Georgia? Well,
I think you could maybe approach it as, this is our team and outreach summary, and this is our robot design summary. Maybe approach it like that. I wouldn't put the award name at the head of the page. I wouldn't separate it like that because several of the awards are grouped into robot design awards. So I would just separate it that way.
And then another question from Samantha. In the notebook, what sections do you recommend us to have? Team, design, bill, or programming? Are there any recommendations for the organization of the notebook? First does have provide information about what sections are recommended for the notebook. For the Think Award and for the Inspire Award, you typically need to have all those recommended sections. It is more based on, it's stated in the past, and Georgia, you can correct me, that the notebook is more focused on the engineering content, and that's the big part of that notebook.
One question earlier to maybe address again was, where can someone sign up for the newsletter you were talking about earlier, Ms. Georgia?
The newsletter, I believe, let me think. I don't actually send that newsletter out. Stephen Hovey and John Quarles are sending that out. But I believe that newsletter goes to every team coach. So they should already be receiving those. If you have not received those, then I would contact Steve Hovey. But I'm pretty sure he is sending that out to every team coach. So I guess if you're a team, then ask your coach, and maybe they can share that newsletter with you.
Another question from Sierra. I know that the printed versions, we were able to tab important sections of a notebook for judges to go through given the limited amount of time. Since this isn't an option remotely, since we're just be submitting a PDF, should we have a page for it? So for the engineering notebook, there is a recommended summary page that connects portfolio to the notebook as a way to refer it back, and that's kind of where the summary page is now. For the portfolio itself, it is 15 pages, so I think those are basically the highlights. It's like taking that summary page that you typically have in front of an engineering notebook and actually pulling out those sections and putting them in a separate document for us to look at. That's I guess kind of another way of thinking of the summary.
And that summary page will be important to have at the front of your engineering notebook so that you can tie the portfolio to the notebook. So your portfolio is going to give the highlights, and then when we go to the notebook, if needed, we won't look at everybody's notebook. It'll just be if we need more information. But that summary page at the start of your engineering notebook would say, these pages highlight certain things. And you still would want to tab certain pages in the notebook that highlight certain things you wanted the judges to see. So remember, portfolio is the summary. You're going to get the judges' attention. You're going to show them, yes, we do qualify for certain awards. And then that notebook will have the deeper dive. It will have the more detail that the judges will be able to come back and look at.
Yeah, a question from Simon. Are links within the PDF that links to certain pages, a combination of tabs, and a table of contents something that judges would utilize? I would say yes, but it also depends on how you're supposed to upload the information and if content like linked pages within a PDF would still be usable after the upload, because I don't know about that process.
I don't know. We don't have that information yet. We haven't been given information about exactly how the notebook will get uploaded. So we'll have to give updates on that as we get that. One comment I want to go back and address about the newsletter. Terry, our senior mentor, did point out that the newsletter goes to the coaches if they have the correct email on file. So coaches, if you are not receiving the newsletter, then again, reach out to Stephen Hovey and make sure he has the correct email.
see, Samantha has another question. Something I don't see often, but I've been wondering about, would links to photo collections on Google Photos be a good thing to include in the notebook? Personally, I would recommend against that, considering the amount of time that judges have, and that the notebook should itself be kind of like a curated collection or like curated journey. Just linking to a photo album may not be able to tell the same type of story that you want to tell the judges. Georgia, if you have any thoughts about that too.
What was the question? I didn't quite...
linking to a Google photo album from the notebook or from the portfolio.
Oh no, I wouldn't do that. No, no, judges don't go to links. No, we only look at the information that is in the portfolio or the notebook itself. No, we don't go to separate links.
Okay. All right. So last chance for any questions. I think we can probably call it at 9:55. That sounds good to you?
Yeah. We've had some questions. And Erin, I think you did a great job on your presentation. You gave a lot of helpful information. So good job.
Yeah. Thank you, Georgia. And Matthew has an excellent point about don't make us have to dig for info as judges. Yeah, that takes up a lot of time that we could be spending actually talking to you or actually looking through your documentation or finishing on time and making sure that you are aware of who advances or who's been awarded or given an award. So yeah, please don't make us search for it. Please, like again with everything in there, the more clearly you can state things and give us summaries of things to look at further, the better it is.
Right, because you don't want to take a chance that we might miss some information. We have limited time. That's, I think, the main reason for the portfolio is, get that important information to the judges up front to make sure we don't miss something. Because it's very easy to miss, hidden in a huge notebook. So,
yeah, there's been multiple times when I think a team doesn't have a section or I think a team doesn't have something and I have to go through the notebook again and I find they actually have the information that we're looking for. So if we didn't take the time to look through it again, the team might have not made the cut. So yeah, right. the don't take that chance, as Georgia was saying.
Yeah, make your portfolio clear, concise, but get that information in there, to make you stand out and show us, hey, this team needs to be considered for these awards.
Definitely. Communication is very, very important, and as Georgia was saying, it's a great skill to have when you get to college and beyond.
Yes. And there is another session on judging. That will be tomorrow at 11:15, I believe, that is specific to FTC judging. So tune in to that also.
Yeah, I'm thinking of listening to that myself, actually, just to learn of any of the new changes this year. All right. I don't think there's any more questions. So thank you again for coming to the section. And have an enjoyable rest of your weekend and enjoy all the other different topics within the symposium. And thank you for coming out again at 9 a.m. to talk about documentation. Eli can answer that question, Sierra, about I think Eli should be able to answer where the recordings will be archived.
Yes, so the recordings will be on the Georgia First YouTube page in the coming weeks after the symposium. And yeah, so if you had any issues viewing this presentation or there was another session at this time that you missed, be sure to check it out. All of the recordings will be uploaded, including our opening ceremonies this morning. Well, a huge thank you to Erin and Georgia. It was an excellent session. And just a reminder that you can enter your next session by going to the Georgia First Symposium page through the Georgia First website or through the email you received from Eventbrite. Well, thank you all for attending. have a wonderful day and enjoy your next session.
Great. Thank you, Eli.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
Eli. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you,
Bye,
Jojo.
everybody.